For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a misty morning in August 1998, marine biologist Xavier Brooks, 31, and documentary filmmaker Preston Garcia, 28, set out from Cooper Landing, Alaska, to document salmon migration patterns along the pristine Kenai River. They never returned. Despite an exhaustive search by the Alaska State Troopers that uncovered their abandoned research vessel days later, equipment still humming, coffee cups half full, the two researchers seemed to have vanished into the vast Alaskan wilderness. For 20 years, their families lived with haunting questions about what happened on those remote waters. Then, in the summer of 2018, as drought gripped the region and water levels fell to historic lows, the Kenai River finally began to reveal its dark secrets. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Xavier Brooks and Preston Garcia, two men who set out to protect one of nature's most remarkable phenomena, only to stumble upon something far more sinister. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. On August 15, 1998, the pristine waters of Alaska's Kenai River flowed undisturbed through some of North America's most remote wilderness. Marine biologist Xavier Brooks and documentary filmmaker Preston Garcia had been there for 3 weeks, methodically documenting salmon migration patterns during the critical spawning season. Their research promised to shed new light on the alarming decline in salmon populations that had puzzled conservation experts for the past decade. The morning began like any other for the two researchers. At 6:43 a.m., Brooks made his final satellite phone call to the research base in Anchorage, reporting excellent conditions for their planned day of underwater filming. Garcia had recently captured remarkable footage of unusual salmon behavior that suggested something might be disrupting their natural spawning patterns. Their 20-foot research vessel, the Marina's Hope, carried state-of-the-art monitoring equipment that continuously recorded water quality, temperature, and fish movement data. The two men had carefully chosen their location, 50 miles upstream from the nearest settlement, where the river's depth and flow created perfect conditions for salmon spawning. By midday, the researchers should have checked in with their base station. The silence drew little concern. Initially, satellite coverage in the area was notoriously unreliable. But as afternoon turned to evening without any communication, the first whispers of worry began to spread through the research team in Anchorage. 3 days later, a routine patrol flight spotted the Marina's Hope drifting in a wide bend of the river. The boat's equipment was still running, methodically recording data to its hard drives. 2 coffee mugs sat on the small deck table, one still half full. The researchers' survival gear remained stowed in its compartments, and their satellite phone lay on the navigation console, powered on but silent. The discovery triggered one of the largest search operations in the region's history. Alaska State Troopers, led by veteran officer Sarah Campbell, coordinated with local search and rescue teams to comb the riverbanks. Helicopters swept low over the dense forest canopy, while teams of volunteers waded through the shallow portions of the river, searching for any sign of the missing men. The disappearance made little sense to those who knew Brooks and Garcia. Both were experienced outdoorsmen who had spent countless hours on remote waterways. Brooks had worked in Alaska for 6 years, studying marine ecosystems from the Bering Sea to the Inside Passage. Garcia had built his reputation filming in challenging environments, from Antarctic ice fields to Amazon tributaries. Their research notes, found intact on the boat, revealed mounting excitement about their findings. The day before their disappearance, Brooks had written about discovering evidence of unusual disturbances in traditional spawning areas. Garcia's camera contained footage from their previous day's dive, showing vast sections of riverbed unnaturally cleared of the vegetation crucial for salmon reproduction. As the first week of searching drew to a close, The absence of any physical evidence left investigators struggling to determine whether they were dealing with a tragic accident or something more sinister. The researchers' families arrived from Seattle and Boston, keeping vigil in a small motel in Kenai, while search teams continued their increasingly desperate efforts. The mystery deepened when examination of the boat revealed no sign of struggle, no equipment malfunction, and no indication of what might have prompted both men to abandon their vessel. The water temperature that day had been too cold for extended survival, and yet no bodies surfaced in the following weeks despite extensive downstream searches. As autumn approached and the salmon run began to wane, the search efforts gradually diminished. The marina's hope was towed back to port, its data recordings providing no answers, only an eerie electronic log of a normal morning that had somehow gone terribly wrong. The case would remain open but unsolved, joining other mysteries of the Alaskan wilderness, while two families began their long wait for answers that seemed unlikely to ever come. The initial investigation into the disappearance of Xavier Brooks and Preston Garcia fell to Alaska State Trooper Sarah Campbell, a 15-year veteran with extensive experience in wilderness cases. From the moment she first set foot on the Marina's Hope, Campbell sensed this case would be different from the typical missing persons report that crossed her desk. The research vessel itself presented a puzzle. Every piece of scientific equipment continued to function perfectly, recording data that showed no unusual patterns in water temperature or conditions on the day the men vanished. The boat's emergency locator beacon remained untouched in its mount, never activated. Most telling was the careful arrangement of research materials, laptops secured against moisture, sample containers methodically labeled, and diving gear properly stowed. Campbell's team conducted an exhaustive analysis of the vessel over 3 days. They discovered minute traces of mud on the starboard gunwale, suggesting someone had climbed aboard from the riverbank rather than entered from the water. The boat's fuel levels indicated it had drifted for approximately 6 hours before being discovered, placing its point of origin somewhere near Devil's Bend, a notorious stretch of river known for its treacherous currents. Interviews with the research team in Anchorage painted a picture of two men utterly devoted to their work. Dr. Jennifer Murphy, who had collaborated with Brooks on previous studies, described his growing excitement over anomalies in the salmon breeding patterns. "Xavier called me the night before he disappeared," Murphy recalled during her interview. "He said they'd found something that could explain the population decline. He wanted to verify his findings before making any formal reports." The investigation faced considerable challenges from the start. The remote location meant few potential witnesses, and the dense forest along the riverbanks quickly absorbed any physical evidence. Search dogs lost all scent trails at the water's edge, suggesting the men had either entered the river or been transported away by boat. Campbell's team discovered that several commercial fishing operations had been active in the area during the previous month. Most were well documented and licensed, but patrol records showed 3 reports of unauthorized vessels in the vicinity. These sightings had been dismissed as routine violations at the time, but now took on new significance. Agent David Anderson from the National Marine Fisheries Service joined the investigation, bringing with him decades of experience investigating illegal fishing operations. His review of satellite imagery from the days surrounding the disappearance revealed unusual boat traffic in normally restricted spawning areas. However, the grainy photos proved insufficient to identify specific vessels or individuals. As August turned to September, the investigation struggled against both nature and time. Heavy rains washed away potential evidence along the riverbanks. Water levels rose, making it impossible to examine areas where the researchers might have gone ashore. The families of Brooks and Garcia maintained a constant presence, their hope visibly diminishing with each passing day of fruitless searching. The most puzzling aspect remained the men's final satellite phone call. The conversation had been routine, professional, with no indication of distress or concern. Yet something had happened in the hours following that call, something significant enough to make two experienced outdoorsmen abandon their vessel, leaving behind all means of survival or communication. By the investigation's third week, Campbell had assembled a substantial case file but few concrete answers. The evidence suggested the men had encountered something unexpected during their research, something significant enough to draw them from their boat, but not alarming enough to trigger a distress call. What that something might have been remained frustratingly out of reach, hidden somewhere in the vast Alaskan wilderness that had already claimed so many secrets. As autumn deepened into winter, the investigation into the disappearance of Xavier Brooks and Preston Garcia gradually succumbed to the harsh realities of Alaska's wilderness. The first snowfall dusted the Kenai River's banks in early October, covering whatever traces might have remained of the two researchers' final movements. Trooper Sarah Campbell maintained her vigil, but each passing week brought fewer leads and dimming hopes. By December 1998, the search area had been combed multiple times without result. The families, who had maintained their presence in Kenai for nearly 4 months, finally returned to their homes in Seattle and Boston. Their departure marked a subtle shift in the investigation's momentum, transforming an active search into the methodical documentation of a cold case. The scientific community felt the loss deeply. Brooks and Garcia's research had promised crucial insights into the declining salmon populations, and their disappearance left a void in ongoing conservation efforts. Dr. Jennifer Murphy continued their work, though she admitted the loss of their data and expertise set the research back significantly. "We lost not just 2 colleagues," she noted in a 1999 interview, "but potentially groundbreaking discoveries about what was happening to our salmon." The marina's hope, after yielding all possible evidence, was eventually returned to the Research Foundation. Its data logs, which had recorded every minute detail of water conditions until the moment of discovery, became part of the case file, a digital testament to an ordinary day that had somehow gone terribly wrong. Through 1999 and into the early 2000s, the case remained officially open but inactive. Trooper Campbell kept a photo of Brooks and Garcia on her office wall, a reminder of the investigation that haunted her career. Every few months, she would review the file, hoping fresh eyes might spot something previously overlooked. The satellite phone records, boat logs, and witness statements revealed nothing new, no matter how many times she examined them. Local fishing communities developed their own theories about what had happened. Some spoke of treacherous underwater currents near Devil's Bend that could have claimed the men during a dive. Others whispered about territorial disputes between commercial operations, though no concrete evidence ever emerged to support these rumors. The case briefly resurged in 2003 when a commercial fisherman reported finding research equipment along a remote stretch of coastline, but the items were eventually traced to an unrelated marine study. Each such lead raised and dashed hopes, adding new pages to an already substantial case file, without bringing investigators any closer to the truth. The families marked each anniversary with renewed pleas for information, their press conferences drawing steadily decreasing media attention as the years passed. They established a scholarship fund in Brooks and Garcia's names, supporting students pursuing marine biology and environmental filmmaking, a way of continuing the work their loved ones had left unfinished. By 2008, a decade after the disappearance, the case had become part of Alaska's folklore, joining other mysterious vanishings in the state's vast wilderness. New investigators occasionally reviewed the file, but time had eliminated most possibilities for fresh evidence. The river had risen and fallen through 10 years of seasons, reshaping its banks and washing away whatever secrets it might have held. The original research boat remained in service, though few scientists requested its use, perhaps disturbed by its history. The equipment that had been running that day was eventually replaced, its data archived in the case files. The coffee mugs, half full when the boat was found, had been carefully preserved as evidence, their contents long since evaporated munda. Objects transformed into poignant symbols of lives suddenly interrupted. The case seemed destined to remain one of Alaska's unsolved mysteries, a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in even the most seemingly peaceful wilderness. No one could have predicted that the truth lay buried along those same riverbanks, waiting for nature itself to reveal what human investigation could not uncover. The river kept its secret for 20 years, until a season of unprecedented drought would finally begin to expose the dark truth about what happened that August morning in 1998. As summer drew to a close in 2018, Alaska experienced one of the most severe droughts in recorded history. The Kenai River, normally swollen with glacial melt, had receded to levels not seen in decades. Along its banks, the dropping water revealed layers of history usually hidden beneath the rushing current. On September 12, a team of hydrologists conducting a drought impact survey made a discovery that would shake the 20-year-old case to its foundation. In a steep-sided section of riverbank near Devil's Bend, the receding waters exposed what appeared to be synthetic material protruding from the sediment. Initial examination revealed fragments of advanced diving gear, the kind used by professional researchers. Dr. Jennifer Murphy, now the senior marine conservation specialist for the region, received the call while preparing for a routine salmon count. She recognized the equipment immediately. It matched the specifications of gear used by Xavier Brooks and Preston Garcia. Hours later, as she stood at the site watching forensic teams carefully excavate the bank, her worst fears were confirmed. The remains of 2 men lay buried beneath 6 feet of compacted sediment and stone. Around them, investigators found cameras, sampling equipment, and most significantly, a waterproof case containing research notebooks. The positioning of the bodies suggested they had been hastily concealed, rather than naturally buried by river processes. But the site held more than just evidence of the researchers' fate. As teams expanded their search area, they discovered the remnants of an elaborate illegal fishing operation. Concrete anchors for unauthorized nets lay partially exposed, along with rusted equipment that spoke of industrial-scale harvesting in this critical spawning ground. The physical evidence confirmed what Brooks and Garcia had apparently discovered 2 decades earlier. Someone had been systematically destroying salmon breeding habitats for profit. Trooper Sarah Campbell, now nearing retirement, returned to active duty to oversee the new investigation. The drought continued to reveal more evidence as water levels dropped further. Half a mile downstream, investigators found sunken boats modified for illegal netting operations. Their hulls deliberately scuttled to hide evidence when the original investigation began in 1998. The forensic examination of the site painted a grim picture of the researchers' final moments. Soil analysis suggested the area had been actively used for illegal fishing at the time of their disappearance. Tool marks on nearby trees matched the type of equipment used by commercial fishing operations of that era. Most telling were the drag marks leading to where the bodies had been concealed, indicating the men had been killed elsewhere and transported to this location. Xavier's notebooks, preserved by their waterproof casing, provided the final pieces of the puzzle. His last entry, dated August 15, 1998, documented the discovery of massive unauthorized nets and artificial barriers that were decimating the salmon population. The handwritten notes included specifications, locations, and most crucially, details about boats and equipment that would eventually lead investigators to Wade Mitchell's defunct fishing operation. The drought persisted through October, allowing investigators to thoroughly document the site. Each day brought new revelations about the scale of the illegal fishing operation that Brooks and Garcia had stumbled upon. The physical evidence, combined with Xavier's preserved notes, began to tell the story of how two dedicated researchers had accidentally uncovered an environmental crime that someone had killed to keep secret. As autumn rains finally returned to the Kenai, raising water levels and reclaiming the crime scene, investigators had gathered enough evidence to move forward. The 20-year-old mystery had broken open, not through detective work or confession, but through the simple act of nature pulling back its watery veil. The river had finally surrendered its grim secret, and with it, the truth about what happened on that August morning when two men set out to protect the salmon and paid with their lives. As evidence emerged from the drought-exposed riverbank in 2018, Agent David Anderson of the National Marine Fisheries Service arrived in Kenai with a singular focus. A veteran of countless fishing violation cases, Anderson recognized that this investigation required a delicate balance of modern forensic techniques and old-fashioned detective work. The agent's first task involved mapping the newly discovered illegal fishing infrastructure against historical satellite imagery. Working with Dr. Jennifer Murphy, he identified patterns of unauthorized activity that had gone unnoticed during the original investigation. The concrete anchors and modified netting systems showed sophisticated planning, suggesting an operation with significant financial backing. Anderson's review of fishing permits from 1998 revealed an intricate web of shell companies and falsified documentation. Cross-referencing these records with the location of the discovered remains, a pattern emerged. One name appeared repeatedly in connection with violations in the Devil's Bend area: Wade Mitchell's Pacific Northwest Fishing Enterprise. Mitchell's operation had appeared legitimate on paper, with all the necessary permits and documentation. However, Anderson discovered discrepancies in their reported catch numbers. During the months surrounding Brooks and Garcia's disappearance, Mitchell's company had reported suspiciously low yields, while their bank deposits told a different story. The operation had been making millions from unreported catches, likely decimating protected spawning grounds in the process. Trooper Sarah Campbell's original case files proved invaluable. Her meticulous documentation of unauthorized vessel sightings aligned perfectly with the timing of Mitchell's known operations. Witness statements that had seemed insignificant in 1998 now carried new weight. Local fishermen had reported seeing unusual activity near Devil's Bend during night hours, but without evidence of wrongdoing, these reports had been filed away as unsubstantiated. The investigation team carefully reconstructed the events of August 1998. Xavier Brooks and Preston Garcia's research data showed they had been systematically documenting declining salmon populations, moving steadily upstream toward the heart of Mitchell's illegal operation. Their final satellite phone call had placed them less than 2 miles from where Mitchell's crews typically set their unauthorized nets. As Anderson dug deeper, he discovered that Mitchell's operation had abruptly changed its fishing patterns immediately after the researchers' disappearance. The company had quickly sold off equipment and relocated to a different region, citing poor yields. Financial records showed large cash withdrawals in the days following the incident, suggesting hasty payments to keep people quiet. The physical evidence from the riverbank proved crucial. Tool marks on the recovered illegal fishing equipment matched the specifications of gear registered to Mitchell's company. Soil samples from the burial site contained traces of industrial lubricants specific to the type of winch system Mitchell's boats were known to use. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Anderson located Mitchell's former operations manager. The man, now elderly and suffering from terminal illness, provided details about the company's illegal activities, but stopped short of discussing the researchers' fate. His testimony established the extensive nature of the poaching operation, while hinting at darker secrets still untold. 20 years had passed, but corporate records, satellite imagery, and banking data had created a digital trail that survived. Anderson methodically assembled these pieces, building a case that connected Mitchell's operation to both the environmental crimes and the researchers' deaths. The evidence painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had valued profit over environmental protection and, ultimately, human life. As autumn approached, Anderson prepared to confront Wade Mitchell. The former fishing magnate had retired to a quiet life in Oregon, perhaps believing the river would keep his secrets forever. But the drought had changed everything, and Anderson's investigation had transformed decades-old evidence into an inescapable web of proof. The time had come to make Mitchell answer for crimes that had haunted Alaska's waters for 20 years. The breakthrough in the 20-year-old case came not through a dramatic confession or an anonymous tip, but through the patient analysis of Xavier Brooks's waterlogged research notes. Found sealed in their waterproof case alongside the researchers' remains, the notebooks had preserved a meticulous record of environmental crimes that would ultimately bring their killer to justice. Agent David Anderson spent 3 weeks carefully examining the sodden pages in a climate-controlled laboratory. Brooks's final entries painted a devastating picture of systematic environmental destruction. The marine biologist had documented illegal nets spanning entire spawning channels, artificial barriers forcing salmon into easily harvested pools, and methods specifically designed to evade detection from aerial surveys. Most crucially, Brooks had sketched detailed diagrams of modified fishing boats, including hull numbers and distinctive modifications that could only belong to Wade Mitchell's fleet. The researchers' precise measurements and coordinates created an undeniable record of illegal fishing activities that perfectly matched the physical evidence uncovered along the riverbank. The notes revealed that Brooks and Garcia had realized the magnitude of their discovery. In his last entry, Brooks wrote, "The scale of this operation explains everything: the population collapse, the failed spawning patterns, the inexplicable gaps in our data. This isn't just poaching, it's wholesale destruction of an ecosystem for profit. We'll bring the footage back tomorrow. This has to be stopped." They never got the chance to return with their evidence. The next morning, according to the timeline reconstructed by investigators, the researchers encountered Mitchell's crew setting unauthorized nets. What happened next remained unclear until Anderson's team located Mitchell at his Oregon home. The former fishing operator had aged into a gaunt, haunted figure. When confronted with Brooks's recovered notes and the physical evidence from the riverbank, Mitchell's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. 20 years of carrying his secret had taken their toll. Mitchell's confession emerged slowly at first, then in a torrent of long-suppressed guilt. He described how his crew had spotted the research vessel approaching their illegal nets. When Brooks and Garcia began documenting the operation, Mitchell made the decision that would haunt him for decades. His men confronted the researchers. An argument ensued, and in the chaos that followed, both Brooks and Garcia were killed. The bodies were hastily buried along the riverbank, their equipment scattered to suggest an accident. Mitchell's crew scuttled their illegal fishing gear and relocated their operation, believing the river's swift current would keep their secret forever. They hadn't counted on Xavier Brooks's waterproof notebooks, preserved like time capsules beneath the mud, waiting for the drought to reveal their crucial testimony. With Mitchell's confession, the pieces finally aligned. The illegal fishing operation had been earning millions annually, devastating salmon populations while maintaining a facade of legitimate business. When Brooks and Garcia threatened to expose the truth, Mitchell chose to protect his operation at any cost. The recovered notebooks did more than solve a 20-year-old murder. They provided a detailed record of environmental crimes that had contributed to the collapse of salmon populations throughout the region. Brooks and Garcia had documented the systematic destruction of spawning grounds, the use of illegal nets that trapped protected species, and the elaborate methods used to conceal the operation from authorities. Mitchell's confession brought closure to two families who had waited 20 years for answers. It also triggered a comprehensive review of commercial fishing practices along the Kenai River, leading to stricter enforcement and monitoring of salmon spawning grounds. Xavier Brooks's final notes, written hours before his death, became both evidence and legacy. His careful documentation had not only brought his killer to justice, but also provided crucial data for protecting salmon populations he had died trying to save. The truth had remained buried for 2 decades, preserved in waterproof pages that finally told the story of 2 researchers who lost their lives defending Alaska's waters. In December 2018, Wade Mitchell stood before an Anchorage courtroom, his weathered face showing little emotion as Judge Martha Reynolds delivered his sentence. 25 years for the murders of Xavier Brooks and Preston Garcia, with additional penalties for environmental crimes that had devastated Alaska's salmon populations for over 2 decades. The families of Brooks and Garcia sat in the front row, their long wait for justice finally over. Sarah Campbell, now retired from the Alaska State Troopers, watched from the gallery as Mitchell was led away in handcuffs. The case that had haunted her career had finally reached its resolution, though the cost had been immeasurable. The impact of the case extended far beyond the courtroom. The detailed evidence of environmental crimes, preserved in Brooks's notebooks, prompted a complete overhaul of commercial fishing regulations along the Kenai River. The National Marine Fisheries Service established new monitoring protocols, using many of the same research methods Brooks and Garcia had pioneered in their final days. Dr. Jennifer Murphy led the effort to implement these changes, working with a team of scientists to restore the damaged spawning grounds Mitchell's operation had destroyed. Within 2 years, salmon populations began showing signs of recovery. The areas once devastated by illegal nets and barriers slowly returned to their natural state, a living memorial to the researchers who had died trying to protect them. The Marina's Hope, the research vessel that had drifted empty for 3 days in 1998, was permanently retired and transformed into a floating educational center. Docked in Kenai, it now hosts school groups and researchers, teaching new generations about marine conservation and the importance of protecting Alaska's waters. A small plaque on its bow bears the names of Brooks and Garcia, along with the coordinates of their final discovery. The families established the Brooks-Garcia Foundation for Marine Conservation, using the settlement from Mitchell's fishing companies to fund research grants for young scientists. Each year, the foundation sponsors 2 researchers to continue the work that Xavier and Preston had started, focusing on the protection of vulnerable marine ecosystems. Agent David Anderson used the case to create new training protocols for investigating environmental crimes, incorporating lessons learned from both the original investigation and its eventual resolution. The recovered notebooks became required reading for marine enforcement officers, demonstrating how careful documentation could reveal criminal enterprises hidden beneath seemingly legitimate operations. In the spring of 2019, as salmon began their annual return to the Kenai River, a small group gathered at Devil's Bend to dedicate a memorial. The simple stone marker, set back from the riverbank where the drought had revealed its long-held secrets, bears an inscription from Xavier Brooks's final notes. The river tells its story to those who listen carefully enough to hear it. The case fundamentally changed how Alaska approached the balance between commercial fishing and environmental protection. New regulations required constant monitoring of spawning grounds, with heavy penalties for violations. The illegal fishing operations that had once operated with impunity found themselves under unprecedented scrutiny. 20 years after their disappearance, Brooks and Garcia's work finally achieved its intended purpose. Their research, preserved in waterlogged notebooks and recovered equipment, provided the foundation for protecting the salmon populations they had died trying to save. The river that had kept their fate secret for so long now flows past their memorial. Its waters cleaner and its salmon runs stronger, a living testament to two men who gave everything to protect it. Their story became part of Alaska's conservation curriculum, teaching future generations about the delicate balance between commercial interests and environmental preservation. The truth that emerged from the drought-exposed riverbank did more than solve a decades-old mystery. It transformed the way Alaska manages and protects its precious marine resources, ensuring that Brooks and Garcia's sacrifice would continue to make a difference long after justice was finally served.